Unspoken grief. The scene that shook Sister Wives fans. The Sister Wives Season 19 mid-season return promised emotional revelations and shifting landscapes for the Brown family. But fans weren't prepared for how the tone would land, or the absence they felt more than any presence. Just 2 months after the tragic loss of Garrison Brown, viewers were met with an episode that stirred complicated feelings. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't an announcement. It was a celebration, one that, in its context, sparked a tidal wave of reactions from the audience. The emotional gravity of the moment didn't come from what was said, but from what wasn't. A sudden shift in focus. The April 20th episode picked up with Janelle Brown's cross-country move to North Carolina. Her departure from Flagstaff marked a new chapter, a fresh start with her daughter Maddie and her family. Together, they had acquired over 150 acres of land, signaling a complete shift in Janelle's priorities and hopes for the future. She referenced her children as she packed, recounting how it felt to leave some of them behind. But something felt different. A name, Garrison's, was absent when she spoke of her kids in North Carolina. The episode had moved forward in time since the finale, and longtime viewers instantly noticed that the tone had shifted without explanation. It wasn't just the silence, it was the scene that followed. A family celebration. Viewers were then brought into a bright, cheerful restaurant scene. Robyn and Kody Brown were out to lunch with their children, dressed for a special occasion. Aurora, Robyn's daughter, had just been baptized, and the family was celebrating. There were laughs, smiles, and warm reflections. Kody spoke emotionally about how proud he was of Aurora, calling the day one of the happiest of his recent years. Robyn shared a moment with him, her eyes filled with joy, saying she felt like they were closer than ever. It was a picture of unity, of happiness. But to fans who knew the timeline, it didn't sit right. A timeline that couldn't be ignored. Kody and Robyn's joyful lunch took place in May 2024, just weeks after the Brown family had suffered one of its most devastating losses. Garrison, the son of Kody and Janelle, had passed away only 2 months prior. The realization hit viewers like a wave. The timing made it impossible to ignore the contrast. One half of the family was grieving in private, while the other half appeared on television, immersed in celebration, without a word acknowledging the recent tragedy. There were no tears, no gestures of remembrance, just laughter over lemonade. The viewers react. Social media lit up almost instantly after the episode aired. Fans were confused, then heartbroken, then upset. "It's not about whether they can smile again," one fan posted. "It's about how quickly they seem to move forward, without mentioning what had happened." Others echoed the sentiment. The contrast felt jarring, almost surreal. Had the episode not included a timestamp, perhaps it wouldn't have stung so deeply. But the date was clear, and so was the absence of any on-camera acknowledgement. Many wondered aloud, was it the show's decision to avoid the topic, or was it a choice made by Kody and Robyn themselves? Grief silenced. There's no handbook for mourning, and everyone processes grief differently. But for fans of Sister Wives, who had followed the Browns for over a decade, the idea that such a loss could be bypassed entirely on screen left them feeling emotionally disconnected. Some viewers empathized, suggesting the scene was filmed out of obligation or production schedule, and that perhaps Kody and Robyn were grieving off-camera. Others, however, felt that the celebratory tone and lack of visible sorrow signaled a painful truth, that the family remained fractured, even in mourning. "If this doesn't show the divide in this family, I don't know what does," one viewer commented. "It's like they live in 2 separate realities now." A family divided by distance and emotion. Janelle had moved across the country with her daughter. Kristen had remarried. and Mary was on her own path of independence. Only Robyn remained close to Kody, and with them, a smaller, quieter household that often felt worlds apart from the rest of the Brown family. The celebratory lunch, filmed so soon after tragedy, became symbolic of the emotional distance between Kody and his older children. Fans remembered past scenes, conversations with Gabe and Garrison, growing tension, strained phone calls. It had become increasingly clear that Kody's relationships with some of his children had suffered in recent years. The events following Garrison's passing only deepened that rift in the eyes of many viewers. The silence speaks loudly. While Sister Wives did acknowledge Garrison's passing briefly at the start of the season, the moment felt more like a prologue than a meaningful tribute. There was no deep dive, no shared recollections, no long pause for memory. In a show built around personal stories and emotional transparency, the lack of reflection left fans with questions. Was it a decision to protect the family's privacy, or a missed opportunity to share an important human part of their story? Even as the show moved forward, the audience held on to that unanswered question. Why wasn't more said? Robyn and Kody's perspective. In a later confessional, filmed weeks after the baptism lunch, Robyn briefly touched on the weight of the last few months. "There's always so much more happening behind the scenes," she said softly. "We're all hurting in our own ways." Kody, too, addressed the loss, though vaguely. "Some things are too painful to process on camera," he said, his voice subdued. "And sometimes I just don't have the right words." But for many viewers, those confessions came too late and didn't go far enough. A call for reflection. In the aftermath of the episode, fans have been urging TLC and the Brown family to offer something more. A dedicated moment, a retrospective, or even a statement acknowledging Garrison's life and memory. Not for closure, necessarily, but for respect. "He was part of this family we've all watched grow," one fan wrote. "He mattered. His absence is felt. He should not be edited out like an afterthought." Others hope that the second half of the season will take time to address the loss with the depth and sensitivity it deserves, moving forward with compassion. As Sister Wives continues, the journey of the Browns remains unpredictable. Their paths have diverged, and their stories have become more complex with each season. But one constant has always been their vulnerability on screen, the willingness to share their joys and their hardships. Now more than ever, fans hope for a return to that authenticity. Not for drama, but for healing. Because in a family built on shared stories, sometimes the most powerful thing isn't a celebration or a wedding or a land deal. It's the quiet courage to sit in the grief and say, "We remember." The smile Even that if broke it them. A Sister Wives story. The air in Flagstaff was thin, unusually still. The kind of stillness that follows something unimaginable, where every breath feels like a question with no answer. Spring had returned to the desert, but inside the Brown family, nothing felt like it had bloomed. The wounds were fresh, raw, invisible to the camera, but visible in the quietness of glances, the tremble in Janelle's voice, and the silence that followed every mention of the name that no one wanted to say too loudly. Garrison. The name echoed in fans' hearts, even if it had barely echoed on screen. A family torn. When Sister Wives returned for its mid-season premiere, fans expected pain. They expected the family to be fractured. They expected grief. What they didn't expect was the brightness of a celebration, and not just any celebration, but one filled with laughter, smiles, and a tone so out of step with what had happened that it stopped viewers in their tracks. The episode began with Janelle Brown in motion. She was leaving Flagstaff, leaving behind the desert, and some of the children who had defined her identity for nearly 2 decades. Gabe, Savannah, and Garrison, though she didn't say his name this time. A subtle omission, but noticeable. She was headed to North Carolina to build something new with Maddie. Acres of land. Possibility. Distance. Christine and her new husband, David Woolley, helped her pack, offering a comforting presence. Her face looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than last season. There was strength in her movement, but sadness in her stillness. Then came the shift. The celebration that broke the illusion. Cut to Aurora Brown's baptism. A radiant Robyn, beaming beside her daughter and Kody, dressed sharp, light in his step, surrounded by his children, speaking proudly of his faith, his family, and the bond he'd shared with Robyn. They went to lunch, a celebration. There was joy in the air, palpable and unfiltered. They toasted to Aurora's spiritual rebirth. They laughed, shared plates of food, smiled into the camera. They even called each other soulmates. And that's when the audience collectively blinked. Because the screen said it all. May 2024. 2 months after the loss that shook the family to its core. And there wasn't a single word. No candle, no photo, no whispered moment. Just celebration. The audience reacts. The reaction was swift and emotional. Sister Wives fans flooded message boards, social media, and comment sections. I had to pause the episode. I couldn't believe they were celebrating like this so soon. He was just here. He was just in the background. And now he's gone, and no one says his name. It felt like emotional whiplash. Many weren't surprised that Kody hadn't directly addressed the tragedy. But to some, the baptism party felt like a pointed omission. Not a celebration in the shadow of grief, but one that seemed to deny it had happened at all. As one commenter put it, "It's not that they smiled. It's that they smiled like nothing had ever happened." Silent storylines. It had already been reported that the family chose to keep Garrison's memory private, out of respect, out of grief, maybe out of protection. But when the cameras kept rolling and the rest of the family began to reappear, fans expected something. A tribute, a moment of reflection, even a few seconds of silence. Instead, they got a baptism brunch with smiling faces and a soundtrack that felt far too upbeat. Kody praised his daughter, saying she was a light in his life. Robyn gushed about the healing power of family. They toasted to brighter days. But for many watching, all they could think about was the absence of a young man with dreams, who once proudly wore his National Guard uniform on camera. A brother. A son. And the silence weighed heavier than any dialogue. The disconnect. Janelle's storyline felt like a separate universe. She and Christine, now more united than ever, discussed the future of Coyote Pass, the changing tides of their family, and the sense of loss that came not just from death, but from distance. It was clear she was carrying more than one type of grief. When asked about her children, she listed them carefully, but Garrison's name was missing. Viewers noticed. It felt intentional, too painful, too recent to speak out loud. Her eyes lingered after the sentence. A pause, but no elaboration. And that silence felt sincere. Christine, ever the emotional compass of the series, didn't bring it up either. Not on camera. It was as though the women bore their grief off screen, where it wouldn't become a spectacle. Meanwhile, Kody and Robyn seemed to live in a different tone entirely. One fan summarized the contrast starkly. Janelle's grief is quiet, buried in her bones. Robyn and Kody's joy is loud, like they're trying to drown something out. Behind the scenes. It later emerged through behind-the-scenes chatter that producers had given the family the option to acknowledge the loss on camera, but the decision was left up to them. Some family members declined. Others, it seemed, moved forward without addressing it at all. For Robyn and Kody, that meant continuing with the filming schedule. The baptism had already been planned. The lunch was already in motion. The cameras were rolling, and they didn't stop. But what they couldn't have predicted was how it would feel, how it would land with viewers who were still mourning alongside them. Fans had seen Garrison grow up on their screens. He wasn't a side character. He was a son, a brother, a part of the emotional fabric of the show. And now, without warning, he was gone, and the show never paused to honor him. The family's silence and the public's voice. While the family may have chosen privacy, the audience chose remembrance. Social media became a memorial. Photos of Garrison, clips from old episodes, quotes, memes, kind words, tributes. And while many criticized the celebratory tone of the baptism episode, others defended the couple, arguing that grief isn't always visible, that people mourn differently. But that didn't erase the sting. They could have said one sentence, a viewer tweeted, one moment, just to let us know they cared. You don't have to be perfect in grief. But pretending like everything's fine, that's hard to watch. Moving forward. The next episode is said to shift tone again as the family begins to process not just their changing relationships, but also the emotional toll of the past year. Whether or not Garrison's memory is addressed more directly remains to be seen. But the moment has already left its mark. For many fans, the celebration in May 2024 wasn't just a plot point. It was a mirror reflecting the deeper disconnect between branches of the Brown family. It was a reminder that the show, once about unity, now revolves around fragmented emotions and the difficult journey of processing pain in the public eye. A legacy beyond the lens. Whatever the future holds, one thing remains certain. Garrison Brown's presence in the show, and in the hearts of viewers, was never small. He was brave, outspoken, a voice of reason when things fell apart. He was funny, tender, and unafraid to challenge his father's decisions. He was human. And no matter how silent the episodes may be, the fans have made sure that silence does not become erasure. Because some names don't fade with time. They echo.